Good day. So I just realized before I started that I don't actually have Twitch chat open, so I can't see what you're writing. Let's just do that. How did you do that? Dashboard. I think you can like pop out the chat or something. Pop out. Put the chat over here. Hello everybody. A tower deep dive. I did not update the description. Can you guys hear me, by the way? There's like green bars in OBS, so I think it should be working. How do I change the settings? Stream? No. Stream manager. I haven't done this in so long. How do you change the edit stream info? There we go. Axum open source development. Vim. I don't know. That's probably fine. Was there anything else? Category. Is that still, there's one called programming, right? Software and game development. Let's do that one. Done. Cool. I think we should be good to go. So welcome to the stream. It's been a while since we've done this one. Done a live coding stream. I don't even know how long. A year, half a year, something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, I've been wanting to get back into them for a while. I really enjoy doing them. And there's a couple of things in Axum and Tower HTTP and some related projects that I've been. There's some stuff there that I'd want to get done, and so I figured why not stream it? That might be fun. So for those who are not aware, Axum is a web framework that I maintain as part of the Tokyo team. I mean, you can look at the docs if you want to see it. I imagine that most of the people watching here have seen it before. There's one particular issue that I opened earlier today, which is this one. Consider removing support for trailing / redirects. The feature is that if you add a route to Axum, maybe we should just show it. World. Is the text size big enough, or do you want it to be bigger? Just let me know. If we have this one, hello, and we add a route for foo, and then if we run that, call it. Obviously call /foo and you get back hello. Whereas if you call foo with a trailing slash, Axum will notice that there's a route without the slash, and then it'll send you a redirect to the route without the slash. And that feature is something that we've had for a while, but I've actually sort of come around on it and started to think that it's actually a confusing feature, not really something that we should support, because it's like a hidden route in a way. Like the user don't know that Axum does this behind the scenes. I'm honestly not even sure that it's documented anywhere. So it's really kind of like a surprising thing that you wouldn't expect a framework to do by default. And I really try to make Axum behave sort of the way you would expect and not like do all these kinds of surprising behind the scenes things. So really, I just want to remove this feature such that a request like this, when you don't have the route with a trailing slash, it'll just become a 404 and it'll call the fallback that you have. Whereas if you then want support for both, you can just add both routes explicitly like this. You could add your own extension trait method kind of thing to router that automatically adds both. I don't think that's something that we will support. Maybe we'll add support for it in Axum Extra. I'm not quite sure. First of all, I just kind of want to remove it. And then I figured if people sort of want to have most of the same behavior back, we could add this normalized path middleware that will just strip any trailing requests or trailing slashes from the URL. And that way, when the client calls it with or without the trailing slash, you only have to declare it like one way in the router in here to get both routes if you had the middleware. So that would be something like layer normalize path layer trailing slash or something like that. And then this would be a middleware that Tower HTTP provides, because it's not specific to Axum, so why build it into Axum when it might as well be in Tower HTTP? Some prior art on that is that I believe, I looked at that earlier today, that Actix Web has a very similar middleware, and that's where I got the idea from. Because I was like, what does Actix do for trailing redirects? And they just do what we're sort of proposing here. It's just a 404, and then there's a middleware that you can effectively add sort of a version of that behavior back. They have a few more ways to configure it, where you can be like, remove the trailing slash. I'm not quite sure what merge only means, or like always add a trailing slash. I think we could add that in Tower HTTP just with different constructors on the layer. But initially, I'm just thinking about adding this one. And then if people want the other one where there's always a trailing slash, then we can just add that if they want. And the keyboard is a, what the hell is it called? A Moonlander, I think. This one said is a Moonlander. I changed out the switches. I bought it with MX Browns and switched it to something else. I don't quite remember what it's called. Merge only, will only merge multiple slashes into one. Yeah, that makes sense. Only merge any present multiple slashes. It seems to be a compatibility thing. This will require all routes to omit the trailing slash for them to be accessible. Yeah, I don't know if we want to remove trailing slash, like double slashes in the middle. Maybe, like why would you have that in a route? That feels kind of weird. So yeah, I think we can actually just get started. So this is obviously going to be a break and change. And so we have a branch here called Axum Next, where we're currently merging breaking PRs into. I was actually imagining that after we've done the next release of Axum, when we merged this one at least to fix CI. And there's a couple of like unreleased PRs that have been merged. We might as well do a release of, and then when those are released, then we can merge this PR and basically start working on Axum 0.6 directly on main, because it's a bit of a pain to do it on a separate branch currently. But we should start on this one. Let's just make sure it's up to date with main. Main it is. Let's make a new branch. Remove TSR. So in the routing module, that is handled in, so router is the thing that you add routes to, and it implements Tower service. It basically does that by looking up the path to call in the router. That gives it like a match, basically an index of the route that you want to call. And then that is handled by a library called matchit, which can give you some of these errors. So it's either missing trailing slash or an extra trailing slash. And then there's a not found. So we basically want to take these two and just merge it with this path down here. But the first thing that I want to do is make sure that we actually have test coverage for these two branches. So I think if I just make this one like that, then we should see some tests fail. Cargo test features axum lib. I would expect some tests to fail now. And it does. And it seems to be like some relevant sounding tests. Let's just do the same thing up here. So now I would expect 2 other tests to fail. There's a testing in nesting that failed. That's interesting. I guess we'll have to look into that one when we remove the feature. All right, it seems like we do actually have test coverage for this week. So I think maybe we can start with just removing, updating this one. Let's define in here. Without trailing slash. I don't know if you can hear the cars outside, like driving around, hooting and playing super loud music. It's a tradition in Denmark that when people graduate from high school, that they will, like the whole class, all the 30, 40 people in a class will like rent a big like truck, van effectively, and like drive around the city and hoot the horn and get really drunk. And they don't drive, there's a different guy driving. And they'll basically make a lot of noise for like 2-3 weeks. So that's going on right now. I feel like we probably can just comment this out. Maybe we can just change it. Not found for trailing slash. Extra trailing slash, because there's like a trailing slash that we don't want. So we add foo, and if we call that one, that should be not found. No location. And just for good measure, let's call that one. So that should fail. I should just bring this back to the way it was. It does. It gets a redirect, but expected for 4. Which path does it hit? Missing trailing slash, extra trailing slash. Suppose it's this one. I just want to make sure that I don't change more code than necessary so that we more or less do test-driven development. So this does actually hit the panic. That's nice. So now we can say these or this. Those both go to the fallback. There we go. And then if we do the other test, not found for missing trailing slash, it's basically the reverse, like that. That should fail now for the same reason. It gets a redirect, but it expected a 4-4. And there we go. That's the same one. And we're green. It seems this one is not called anymore. What did it do? Get the path, look if there's a query param. Change the path. Yeah, it just adds, it effectively replaces the path on the URI. Not important, I mean we can just remove it. And let's see, this one can go away. This one, I mean this one's fine, right? It just declares both paths and then call them both and they go to different routes. We can keep that. Now over here, we could do something like that, just match on all errors. But I actually like doing it explicitly like this, because that way when match it if they update this enum to have new cases, then we'll be notified and have to handle those somehow. And matchit is not a public dependency, so we can easily update it without making any breaking changes to axum. Let's run all the tests. And I'm passing -lib here just to not run the docs test. That's just a little bit faster. There's a bunch that failed. See this one. Wildcard with /. That one failed with, it wanted a redirect. That is interesting. I guess that's because there is no trailing slash in the request, but this wildcard doesn't match like nothing, just like an empty like end of the path effectively. I believe that's been changed in the most recent version of matchit, which we haven't updated to in this branch quite yet. But I think when we do, then this test would actually pass, so that this request would match this path. I'm not quite sure. There's something that's happened there, but I think it does make sense that, given how matchit is implemented, it is now a 404. So this one's not found. And I do have a PR open here that updates matchit to the latest version and tweaks nesting and those kinds of things. So when we revisit that one, then we'll possibly get to revisit this test as well. Maybe this one will become like an OK because the route does actually match. I'm not quite sure. That one, it didn't check for like a location, right? No. There we go. With trailing /post. What is this issue? Use a 308 instead of 301. Yeah. So this one we can just disregard effectively because we don't have that feature anymore. So this test can go away. And this is the same one. I think that one was failing too, right? Without trailing /post. Yeah, that's this one. We can just nuke that. Which is this one? Out trailing / at the base. Yeah. Yeah, that was the one that's more about matchit than about the feature that we're doing here. I'm still curious why there's one of the nesting tests that are failing. There's like so many edge cases with nesting. Test nest, and then it was 7. Yeah, so this generates like a bunch of tests for if you have like a route that you nest at this path, I think that like has this route, then and then I call this one, then I'd expect to get an OK. Nested path. Yeah, so that was not quite right what I said before. So nest, let's do one that makes more sense, that aren't like empty in half of the places. So if you have the path, if you nest something at / and the thing you nest has a /a, then I would expect that the resulting route becomes /a, because this is effectively nesting at the root. And you don't want to add a double /. So this one says, if you have a thing that you nest at A, and the route that you're nesting has /, it's just like nothing, then you should be able to call it here. And previously it would expect that to be an opaque redirect, but that becomes a 404. Is that true? Let's see. So that means the route inner, we do like dot route on slash, and then we nest that at sort of like that. And then if we call a does that make sense? What happens if we, which line actually failed? 444. That's just where the macro is. Because like there's two halves effectively here. We're just testing the first one. Tuple struct with a similar name. Let's maybe do the top half first. It was not that one that failed. So it is this guy that fails. I'm having a hard time just even keeping up with this nested path out. Is that what we call it? Out path. That was the most unhelpful debugging ever. Route. Nesting at. Nesting is always super annoying, and there's tons of edge cases that you don't really consider. Wait, why do we print it twice? What? Where does this print come from? I don't think debug formats args. Oh god, you're totally right. Ha! That makes sense. Wait, must be a string literal. We nest something at A. We nest it at A. And then because it's an opaque service, it gets nested here. And then that has a wildcard that doesn't match. Yeah, so this is effectively the same case as before. The route that we want to be able to call is just /a. Because I imagine that as a user, if you did something like this, you would sort of be surprised almost that there is a trailing slash here. I don't remember if you can like do this to fix it, to get the additional, but like that would be the additional trailing slash. I'm not quite sure. I kind of think I just want to make the test pass, so change it to a 404. And I know that when we revisit and update to the next version to match it, then we'll get to revisit this test. Because I do remember while working on this PR that this test changed and effectively became way simpler. So I think I'll actually just make a note here. Make sure still makes sense with TSR removed. Commented nest 11 looks similar. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so if you nest at a thing that has a trailing slash, then you do get a trailing slash in the expected path. Yep. Honestly, I just want to comment this out and then say we'll revisit this in that one. Testing is so easy. You just uncomment the test that you don't want to deal with. And look at that, everything passes. Cool. Let's run the doc test as well. There's a bunch of unused stuff here. Oh, sweet. So much code that we can remove. Was it documented anywhere that we did this? Change log? Nope. Yeah, always curious who makes sure the test code is right. Yeah, you don't have tests for your tests, so how you know that your tests are correct? That is a good question. I think we'll solve the halting problem first, and then we'll solve that one next. So it didn't seem like it was documented anywhere, because trailing, like the docs didn't say trailing anywhere. So honestly, I think this is all that we really had to do. Remove trailing slash redirects. Do I call it breaking change? Breaking, yeah. I maintain several open source projects, and the way that we do the change log is different in each of them. So I never know, like, if there's multiple sections for fixes or breaking changes or how we do it. And these are not sorted. That's annoying. Remove trailing slash redirects. Previously, if you added a route for slash foo, axum would redirect calls to slash foo slash to slash foo, or vice versa for that say that? Like, we no longer do that. It's now a 404. Previously, if you added a route for /foo, axum would redirect calls to /foo to /foo. Those requests will now be sent to the fallback. Yeah, that is no longer supported, and such requests will be sent to the fallback. Remove trailing / redirects and into axum next. Ask for review, axum, breaking change. Let's just look at what we did. Yep, I think that looks good. Reference EPR. Cool. Wait a second, this is totally wrong. Because I was thinking, why aren't all the breaking changes that we made on axum next, why aren't they listed up here? For some reason, Git put them down here. That's probably also why this list isn't sorted. We should fix that. I think we only made breaking changes to axum itself. Let's just double check. Yes. All these are definitely up here. Oh god, they're totally mixed up. Why is this one in there so many times? This one's here, this one is up there. And this one's up there. Ah, that's because my Vim sorting is weird. It puts this one lower. Oh well. Why does that one get sorted like that? I don't know. I guess they're lexicographically sorted. I don't care, as long as there is some sorting to it. Let's just see what we move. Yeah, this is definitely not shipped. Neither is this. Extract the middleware, nope. This one's not either. I think we're good. Where is the link for this one? That one's here. Yes. Fix change log. Cool. So that was that one. That was pretty straightforward. I don't think there's anything else that's immediately actionable. So maybe we could do the middleware, this one, normalized path. Normalize or normalize? And Tower HTTP has like cargo features for everything. I go back and forth on whether that's a good idea or not. Let's see. It's kind of like if one of the middlewares like suddenly requires a new dependency, like if our sort of logic or setup first of all was that if a middleware didn't require any dependencies, then it was not feature flagged. But then suddenly it does require a dependency, and we add that in a non-major breaking version, then it's like even if you didn't use that middleware, you get that other dependency, which is kind of annoying. But at the same time, it's kind of annoying for users that they have to enable so many features. I wonder how many people just enable like full to get everything. I mean, most of the stuff that you probably wouldn't get otherwise is stuff like compression. But otherwise, like axum depends on most of these things. Yeah, so honestly, I'm not sure if having features for everything is really worth it, but oh well. Lib, make a module for it. We put them in their own module. Nope. .rs. I believe I have a snippet for it. Normalize path. That gives us a layer, the layer implementation, a service that has the similar shape that all Tower HTTP services has, and then just a blank service implementation. Cool. This one has to be response request body. Oops. Request body. Request. What the hell happened here? Oh my god, this got totally... What the hell? I got vimmed. There we go. Request, rec, body, response, res, body, import them. Request, rec, body. Cool. And the reason that we do this, even though like we need normalized path needs to take a request so we can access the URI, but we don't technically need the response. But this is a convention that we just always do in Tower HTTP, such that someday, it's unlikely for this one, but if we need to access something on the response, then if we didn't do that and we had just done this, it would technically be a breaking change to change it to this. So we do that just to be sort of forward compatible with those kinds of changes. I think we usually put inline on pull ready if it doesn't do anything. But yeah, normalized path is basically a specialized version of map request from Tower. Cool. I think we should actually write some tests first. Let's just make async fn handle takes a request. We don't need to be generic here. We might want to put like an assertion in here that the path looks correct or something. So let's just move it in here so it's like a local function. And then we can say service is service builder, new service fn handle. I actually think the constructor should be, what did we call it before? Trim trailing slash. Because then we can do, why is it not like that? Trim trailing slash. Then we can add another one that like always adds a trailing slash if that is something that people want. Cool. Actually, we don't care about the request or response body. So we could just be like, this one is that, and this one's a string. And we can say request.uri to string. And then we can very easily like call the request and see what it actually was, what the URI actually was when it reached the service. So then we would expect that if we say service ready and import service extension, call request builder body. If we call it with /foo/, wait, then the body should be that. Works. What do you call the module? Norm. So that should fail because we haven't actually implemented it yet, which is kind of delegate directly. Yep, and it fails in the way we would expect. So we get the trailing slash, but we expect it not to. We don't need to import pin because we're not doing a future. Let's make a helper function. Let's call it like remove trailing slash. Takes a path. And it probably returns let's say that it just returns a string for now. It'll probably be like if the path doesn't currently contain a trailing slash, then it just returns the same one. Otherwise, it removes it. It might actually be a stir. I'm not quite sure. So then we say rec URI path is a string. And then we actually need the replace path that we had in axum way back. How do we want to do that? for now, let's just say this is path to owned. And then we want to replace place URI. I don't know what's going to be most ergonomic. With a new path. And that one doesn't do anything. Should still fail in the same way. It does. Let's see. So then path trim and matches a slash. That returns an option, right? No. Returns a string size with all suffixes of that pattern repeatedly removed. Interesting. So it removes all the trailing ones. Cool, that's exactly what we want. I was worried that we had to do like a loop or something. That means this is just a stir. We can probably just inline this directly. That's kind of silly to have that as its own separate function. Let's just look at that, see what it returns. This one can now take a slice. That's kind of annoying. Let's just do that. Because we're borrowing from the request, we're both borrowing the URI's path immutably, and we're borrowing the request itself mutably. So that does work. We get back the path without the slash. Let's just inline this then. That's kind of silly having it that on its own. Although we almost should check if the path actually changed, right? Because otherwise, if it doesn't change, then we're allocating a string for no reason effectively, which is not necessary. I kind of think we just want to inline. What if we do that in like one function? And we say something like that. If path URI path ends with a slash, if it doesn't end with a slash, then we don't need to do anything. Let's leave that unimplemented because we haven't written a test specifically for that case. Otherwise, we say new path remove like that. And then we say, so URI is super annoying, where you can't just replace the path, because the path and the URI on the query, like all this stuff, is stored together in like a single byte buffer, and then it just keeps track of where in that array effectively the value, the query begins. So if you like look at the implementation, you can say path and query. Gives you a path and query. That's basically a single byte, a single like buffer, and then it just stores where the query begins. And that's why they can't easily give you like have you just replace the path. It could probably do that, give you like a query mute or a path mute, but that's not implemented. Which means that you kind of have to take the path, like the query apart, check if there is a query parameter, and sort of put things back together. which does involve a bit of some allocations, which is not the most sort of ideal thing, or the most ergonomic thing. Let's say, so that will be URI, path, and query. When's that none? Isn't there always a path and query? Return the path and query components of the URI. Scheme inner is not none. All right. Path. I guess if it's none, we just don't do anything. Because in my mind, like the URI always had a path, and if you and would just sort of default to like an empty path. All right. Some path and query. And that one has a path and a query, and then you can do format, new path, query. That is if there is a query. Else, new path. There's an into parts. And there's probably, is there a from parts? There is. Oh damn, URI is so annoying. Yes, it is extremely annoying. I think honestly, there is the URL crate. And from what I remember, that one is like less annoying to work with. I haven't used it. Yeah, there's like a set path. That's just that. Like that's all we need. That's what I want. I just want to be able to do this, and then that deals with query params too. Honestly, we should probably add that feature. I don't think it's too hard. Yeah, let's not do this. Let's use the parts. URI into parts. And URI is reference counted, so cloning it is not expensive. It doesn't actually allocate anything. And then if the parts, we just want to replace this guy effectively. So that's probably something like this. Parts, path and query. If we need to, this one implements from stir. Yeah. So this one is like new path and query. And the type is this one. What I sort of imagine that we can do is something like this. Parts, path and query, new path and query. something like that. That'll probably have to be something like that. Which means that's a path and query, and we want to make a new one of those with replacing just the path in the middle. If there is a query, then we want to keep that. Otherwise, it's just new path. Parse unwrap. Just foo for now. Hey, how are you doing? I'm doing good. How are you doing? Does that make sense? So our test doesn't have any query params yet, so let's actually uncomment this one. I don't know how to make a URI that doesn't have a path and query, so I'm not sure. Like, we could do this and then figure out how to do that in a test, but I think that's fine. So I do expect this one to pass, right? Cool to see a Danish streamer. Yeah. I gather from your name that you're Danish as well. It's like the name of some castle somewhere. There's water on the table from my drink. It fails. What did we do wrong? We don't actually rebuild the URI. From parts. URI. Like that. I don't actually think any of those unwraps can fail because we're not adding any non-UTF-8 stuff to the path. Cool, so that works. I have no idea if this is the most optimal code. It's probably not. But I would like to add a few more tests before we fix it. I don't think we need to go through all the request response service stuff. We can basically just call this one directly. What do we want to call it? With maintains query. Let's see, we probably also want removes multiple trailing slashes. What else? Is no op if no trailing slash. That's this case up here. We can probably do that first. URI is slash foo. And then remove. Can it be compared to a string? It seems like it can. So this test should panic. And it does on line 62, which is this one, if it doesn't end with a trailing slash, then we don't need to do anything. Nice. It maintains the query param. A is A. Then that should be the final thing. I should add a exclamation mark keyboard command to Nightbot. I'm gonna make a reminder of that. The keyboard is in, we looked it up just before, is in set as a Moonlander, it's called. I don't remember what the switches are called. They weren't available on the website, I think. Not implemented 73, that's this one. That should just be this. New path and query in the middle. There we go. I don't think we can use the new syntax where we put the things in here because towers MSRV is not high enough. Yeah, I don't remember in what version you were able to put the formatting params directly in the braces, but it's definitely after 151. That should be that one. It removes multiple. Very nice. I think that was all the test cases, actually. And let's see if there's anything that we have to change. This variable name is really bad. So we don't, in this case, we don't need to allocate. Can we just do that? We can. Not. Almost. We can just make that a cow. Cow borrowed. Nope. This is owned. And then it'll only allocate if it needs to in this case, otherwise it won't. And I think that's just a pass. It does. I think we can remove this type annotation. Cool. Anything else? Oh yeah. So usually when we have, if a layer or a service, a middleware has multiple constructors, then we don't provide this layer method. Because if we ever were to add another one, and I'll just turn on the music, sorry about that. If we ever add like another one here, that's like always add trailing slash, then it's not clear which one this layer calls. Does it call like this one or does it call this one? So I think actually we're going to be conservative and not have that one. Now that I think about it, why aren't we getting any warnings about missing docs? It is a public module. What the hell? Do we get an ice and Clippy on Rust? Interesting. Alright, that's funny. Is that because is Clippy like panicking and that's why we're not getting any warnings? Because like we have warn on missing docs. We're not turning that off anywhere. So like why aren't we getting any? That was a good day when you get an ice and Clippy. Yeah, it has so many concerns it just gave up. It's like when Rust format, if you make a line that's so long, the Rust format just gives up. Oh well, I guess we can just write the docs ourselves. So I think, can we derive copy on this one? Do we do that in other cases? We do in a bunch of places, it seems. I think it's fairly safe to derive copy on this one. Because like it's a breaking chain to take away, but like what more would we add here? We might add like an enum that tells it which of these like multiple constructors we might add, but that one can just be copy as well. If we were to add like a function, sort of custom callback kind of thing, I don't see why we would do that. I think deriving copy is probably safe. We can do it here as well. There's no future. Yes. Oh, I think this one, a case that we're missing is multiple trailing slashes and a query param. I think that should work because it probably has a dedicated query accessor. But I think just to be sure, we should do that. Remove multiple slashes even with query. And these lint warnings is just certain combinations of features leads to some branches not actually being reachable. Probably should fix that. Nice. Let's look at another middleware to see how the docs usually are like. Layer that applies normalized path, which normalizes paths. What does Actix say? Actix web. Middleware for normalized plus so the routes can be matched more flexibly. More flexibly. I would see like more consistently or something, because it means that you don't have to do this, that you can just be consistent and not have the trailing slash here. We usually have like a C module docs for more details. I think I'll just do that here and then actually explain in the top what it does. whoops, I meant to put that here. Let's see, any trailing slashes from path. Any trailing slashes from request paths. That sounds kind of weird. Will be removed. For example, /foo. For example, a request with will be changed to /foo before reaching the inner service. It's not like the best phrasing in the world. Any trailing slashes from request paths will be removed. For example, I think it's okay. We're usually pretty consistent in how we do the docs, so I'm just looking at that to see how we do that. This is middleware that normalizes a path. See the module docs for more details. Create a new layer. We can just do that the same way. This macro just expands into a ref get mute and into inner methods that we have on all our middleware. And then the top docs are like this. Middleware. I feel like that could be similar to this. And then we could say this again. Any trailing slashes from request paths will be removed. I think that's fine. And then this one is normalize path. And then we can say will not have trailing slashes. That's probably fine. Let's just see it in RustDoc. Normalized. There's a typo there. That should be because it should match the layer, right? So it should be normalize path. what that file is. Normalized path. Did Rust Analyzer not move the file? I guess not. I thought that you could like do rename on a module and Rust Analyzer would automatically move the file as well. I guess not. Let's check it out again. Some complaints. That seems unrelated to what we're doing now. Normalize path. Middleware that normalizes path. Middleware that normalizes paths. Will not have a trailing slash. Let's just make it super specific here. Handle will we'll see /foo. And why are there two of those? Does set status have that too? Because that's where I copied the docs from. What? Why didn't we notice that when we reviewed it? All right. If someone want to make a super easy PR to Tower HTTP, just remove the duplicate function here in the docs for set status. That's just a fat finger. Normalized path will not have trailing slashes. Trim trailing slashes from path. Sweet. I think that is it. Trim trailing slash. Should it be trim trailing slashes or trailing slash? Actic just says trim. Trim trailing slash. Trim trailing slashes. If we were to add another one, it would be always. If we added another one that was like always add a slash, then that one would probably be called always add slash or something, and then slash would be singular. So it would be always add slash. You wouldn't say always add slashes. That's kind of weird. So I think we're going to stick with trim trailing slash just because, I mean, it's also shorter. I don't think it's less or more confusing than if it was plural, even though technically we remove all the slashes. Yes, I think that's fine. We could make this one like that. Why am I not getting any autocomplete? But I don't really think that matters all too much. And we can easily add another field here if there's like a variant inside. Yeah, I think that is fine actually. Normalized path. What do we usually call the commits? Add normalize path and middleware. And yeah, see here the changelog is different. We have sections for each. That's just for historic reasons. I think that was what Tower did, and I just basically for this repo when I started it copied most of the setup from Tower. So this one is just add normalized path middleware. We do have a builder that gives you like helper methods to apply a layer or a middleware. So instead of saying like dot layer, timeout layer, you should say dot timeout or dot trace or dot compression. The question is if we should have the same for this one. We could call it just trim trailing slash. Or we could call it like normalize trim trailing slash. Honestly, I think trim trailing slash is fine. Yeah. Let's add that too. I think that's nice to have. God, there's so many methods here. Trim trailing slash. The feature is normalized path. That was weird. Why did it go like that? It doesn't take any arguments. Normalize path. Remove trailing slashes from paths. See blah 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 for more details. Oh, exclamation mark project is out of date. I mean, technically we are doing tower stuff, but it's not like a deep dive. That stream I did, I don't even know, a year ago, something like that. Currently we're adding a new middleware to Tower HTTP, which is a middleware library kind of thing for Tower or for Rust. Like that. Let's just amend. Make a pull request. Let's see. No dependencies. It's kind of annoying that it says plural slashes here, but it's singular here. But it also says remove and not trim here. What does the standard library do? Because they have methods like trim on a string. What does he do? Returns. What was the one that we actually called over here? Trim end matches. Yeah, I think singular is fine too. I just want to make sure. Yeah, here in the standard library doesn't even say trim at all. If it's fine enough for standard library, then probably fine for us. It's just these kinds of like consistencies that you want to pay attention to. Yeah, I think we're good. I do want to like motivate why we're even doing this in the first case. In axum, That means a little more work for users. If they want their routes do router new so that's like what you would have to do if you didn't use this middleware. Whereas if you did, you would just do that. Will this work with Axum at all? It won't. It won't work like this. I just realized the routing is done before any middleware are called. So like the request comes in and it'll be like this. Then Axum looks up which service to call, and then it calls the service. And then the middleware is sort of applied around that service. The middlewares, yeah, so the middleware run, they run after routing. If we just kind of look at that in Axum, that's unfortunate. Like when we add a route, we do a bunch of checks. Eventually we here insert into the router. When we call layer, yeah, you need to apply it around the entire router. That's just like super subtle. People are not gonna realize that that's how it works. That also means then they can't do use into make service on the router. They have to use some other make service from Tower. And then when we do .layer, we effectively rebuild the entire router with so we convert all the route into an iterator that gives us the ID and the route itself. Then we apply the layer to that router, and then we just sort of rebuild the whole thing. I think this is just a hash map of the ID and then the routes themselves. And then when we actually look up the request, we get the route ID. Yeah, so this node is basically a router from the path to the route ID that is in the map. So we do the routing. Like there's no middleware that's been called yet. We haven't changed the request. And then we actually call the route, which like looks it up in the map, does some stuff down here, and then eventually ends up calling it. That's annoying. So that means you would have to do something like this. Or like service builder. Whatever the method was. So I still think this middleware makes sense to have, so I don't think this is a reason not to add it. But it definitely is sort of annoying, actually. Is there a way that we can resolve that? So in axum we already have two methods to add a layer. We have layer that just adds it around all the routes that you have, and we have another one called route layer that only adds it, that doesn't add it around the fallback, which means that the middleware is only called if there actually is a matching route. Do we want like a third one? This route design is a must. Yeah. Because like way back in axum 0.1 and 0.2, it would have worked like this, because we did effectively apply the layers around the entire router. We don't do that anymore. All right. Well, I still think this makes sense to have, but it definitely feels like there's need for another thing in axum to make this easier to do. Because the fact that you can apply a middleware around the entire router is not really obvious to people. It also means that, like, if you have a function that like takes a router, adds some layers, and returns a router, you can't use that anymore in the same way, because the type changes. It's no longer just router. We do have this one here, which it's not really similar, but it's like middleware that changed the request body type. The type is no longer a router with the default body type here. Now it's a different body type because this middleware changes the body type on the request. Yeah. I think this is something that we definitely need an issue for in axum. That also means this doesn't quite make sense anymore. Well, sort of. It makes a little more work for users. If they want their routes to be matched both with and without a trailing slash, this middleware addresses that. Let's just edit this in Vim. What comments are these even? To keep the type, we can box it, but that adds overhead. Yeah. Yeah, I think honestly, I used to be afraid of boxing stuff, but I've learned that the sort of the ergonomics that you get from not having insane complex types, like the ergonomics versus the performance, is a good trade-off to make. Like typically you want to choose ergonomics in that case. Not always, but most of the time. And like erasing the type will require a box of some kind, so you're definitely right. Yeah. Oh well. Let's do this. Using the middleware, we only have to add one route. Note that axum's router layer cannot be used since routing happens before any middleware are called. Thus, routing the trailing slashes wouldn't be removed Note that Axum's router layer cannot be used since routing happens before any middleware are called. Thus the requests would 404 as the trailing slash. Let's just leave that off. It's probably fine. That is something we have to address separately in Axum, but I still think this will make sense on its own. Cool. New middleware. Ask for some reviews. Cool. Anything else? It failed CI. Oh yeah, that's because, yeah, fuck, this one was super annoying. So we had, it's like CI has been failing for a while, where like because one of our dependencies, actually a transient dependency, bumped their minimum supported Rust version to something higher than Axum's. And they did that without a breaking change, which is fine. We do that too. But that meant that our tests for our minimum supported Rust version would fail because they would pull in like 0.3 of dependency X or whatever. And according to Semver, it doesn't matter if it pulls in like 0.31 or 0.32. But 0.2 had like updated to the 2018 or 2021 edition, which our MSRV had not. So we like bumped our MSRV in a release, and then it turned out that we actually didn't bump it far enough, and that was just super annoying. So I basically fixed CI by like updating to the minimum versions. So instead of using, like if 0.3.2 is the highest version, but the minimum sort of allowed by what's in our cargo toml is 0.3.0, I ran CI with those, so minimum versions effectively. That's an unstable feature that you can use in cargo. That triggered a whole bunch of other errors where like older versions, if we used the minimum version of that, it wouldn't even build on the latest Rust anymore for like God who knows what reasons. And we basically worked around that by like making a new internal crate in the workspace that we're never going to publish, and it just depends on the crates that had issues. So that we make sure that the minimum version that we get of time is at least this one, and we're not going to get one that's like lower than that. So that was a pain in the ass, but it's fixed now, and CI does actually pass on this PR, but it means that any other PR until this one is merged still fails on minimum supported Rust version. But that's fine. We should fix the changelog though. Yeah. Axum next. This one goes down here. Cool. Anything anything else? Oh yeah, I want to file an issue on that thing that we ran into. What is it? It's like middleware that running middleware before routing is hard or something like that. Middleware cannot change the request in a way that impacts routing. I don't know, that phrasing isn't great, but yeah. As part of removing trailing / redirects, I've added a middleware to HTTP. However, that requires before routing that means router layer cannot be used since it only applies the middleware, while since those middleware only run after routing. Instead, you have to do something like which isn't very obvious. And totally shared or something similar. Axum, I guess feature request I'm using each decision 0.6. Cool. I don't think there's anything else. That was actually all that I had planned for the stream. Any questions about any of the stuff that we've been doing? Let's see, no new notifications, that's fine. Yeah, I don't think any of these things are immediately actionable. Like, we could continue on this one, it's currently just a draft. But we've been going for like 2 hours now, it's almost 11 here. And I do have to sleep eventually, so and there's still like a bunch of stuff to do here. There's a bunch of things to figure out, and there's some docs to update and some tests. But we could do another one, another stream where we get this the match it thing going. This is only the sort of first half of that. The big change here is that I ended up adding a separate nest service method, because it's kind of confusing now that nest, it'll like check if, so you give it a generic service thing, and then nest will like check if it actually is a router, and if it is, it'll do one thing, otherwise it'll do another thing. That means there's a bunch of like, and this is not documented anywhere, I wouldn't even know how to document that. It's sort of a performance optimization, and it simplifies a bunch of code. But it means there's some subtle like differences between the two. For example, I think like you can add, if this router has a fallback, I don't remember if that's allowed, but there's like some things where if you do it one way, it works in one way. There's some inconsistencies between them, essentially. And while working on the match it update, which changed how wildcards work and how they're matched, which Nest uses, I was about to add another inconsistency, and I was like, this is kind of crazy. Why don't we just have two methods? There's one called Nest that only takes a router, and that just does this path, the common path. And then there's another one called Nest Service that just takes an opaque service. And then we can clearly document how those two methods are different. So I think that's going to clean up the API quite a bit, even though it is unfortunate that you need two methods for it. But yeah, I don't think we can get around that. And then the change that I really wanted to make was such that fallback, instead of it being its own separate service that's sort of stored in the router, let's see, fallback. Yeah, fallback is just like its own service that we store because we have to have a thing that we apply middleware to. Then that could just become like a special wildcard route. Because there's some change, I don't quite remember, there was some change in match it where, let's see, yeah, it was like if you had a /static and a /catch-all, those matches would previously consider overlapping, but in the latest version it doesn't. That means that we can now use such a route just as the fallback, and that also means that it's more easy to add like fallback on nested routers and those kinds of things. So that was the thing that I eventually wanted to fix, but first I just had to update match it and then do all this nest business. So yeah, as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff here that's sort of related, so I think this makes sense to do in its own stream. It'd probably be a couple of hours of work, I'm not quite sure. Any reason to have the normalized path layer in Tower HTTP instead of handling it all in Axum itself? Yes, I see your point. So we could, like, the reason that you can't directly use normalized path with Axum kind of makes it feel like it should be a thing that's built in, and then Axum can handle it and strip the trailing slashes before calling the router. I think I would like to explore this one first, because if we can find a way to do that, then that's sort of a more general solution, and then you could just use normalized path. There's also a thing where I really want to avoid adding configuration to routers, partly because I think it makes it easier to like dig your own grave and build a routing setup that's very confusing, but also just because there's a bunch of things like edge cases that are sort of Axum specific. For example, I think merge. Like fallback is essentially a configuration thing on router. And we have to handle the case where you merge a router with another router and both of them have a fallback. Like both of them have a configuration that are sort of conflicting. And then in this case, we just panic if you merge two routers that both have a fallback. So for each piece of configuration that we add, we have to be like, how do we reconcile those configurations when you're merging and nesting stuff? And I'm like, in the case of normalized path, if we did that, I'm not sure that we could make it work easily, because the way net merge works is it takes something that can be converted into a router, and it just takes all the routes from one thing and adds it. So it just calls .route with all the other routes. So in the end, there is only one router, which means we couldn't like have the config. There wouldn't be like two inner routers, and then one router removes the trailing slash and the other one doesn't, because there is only one. So that's why I would like to avoid making it a configuration if possible, because it complicates a bunch of other things. And then this just feels like a generally useful thing to have. Yeah. I think this one's really cool. So the like long-standing issue that we've had since basically the beginning of time is that you have to be careful about the order that you put your extractors in. Yeah, like this one, I started to see your point. Thanks for a lot of the explanation stream. No worries. It's always good to talk these things through and actually sort of try to explain it. Like this one is just subtly broken, where the request will remove all the extensions, and if you then try to extract an extension afterwards, it leaves like an empty extensions map behind, and it's like, hey, state doesn't exist. Whereas it actually does, you just need to put the arguments in a different order. So effectively, you always want request last. And I would love for this to be a compile error, but haven't quite found a way to do that yet. So then the suggestion was, what if we had multiple from request traits? We had like a from request mute that somehow couldn't consume the entire body or all the requests or something. And then we had a from request once that can do whatever it wants. It has ownership over the request effectively. And then we can write the handler trait implementations. So all these implementations down here for functions with different number of arguments, where the last one, so all these would be from request mute or from request ref or whatever, and then only the last one can be from request once, and then that one, that's basically the only place that you can extract the request body. That would sort of at compile time enforce that the last argument is the only one that can extract the body. There's some issues with actually making it work. I'm not quite sure what the traits should look like, and like which trait should inherit from who, and how you want to do the blanket impulse and stuff like that. But this is definitely something that I want to explore for 0.6. The current version is that we do something like this, where there are two separate traits, from request once and mute. And then when you implement mute, you also have to implement once. That means imagine that you have like an extension that would just implement from request mute. So that can be anywhere in the argument list. It can be the first one and it can be the last one. And then this means that when you implement from request mute, you also have to implement once. There's a bit of boilerplate involved in adding both of those implementations. Fortunately, we can't add a blanket implementation like this, where if you implement once, you get mute for free. That results in a conflicting implementation, which is really unfortunate, because like that would be super elegant. It's basically like the function, the fn traits that you have in the standard library. I mean, maybe we'll just have a macro to generate this second implementation down here. I'm not quite sure yet, but it's definitely something that I want to explore. Because I feel like this question of why does this fail, but this doesn't fail, is like, that's a thing that we get at least once a week in the Discord. And it's very subtle for sure. Yeah, it sounds like a bit like the function tree. That's exactly the inspiration. And I didn't come up with this idea. This was Jonas who had this idea, and I think it's really interesting. So yeah, it's funny. Like you can think that your API is more or less finished for a long time, and then suddenly someone drops by in the Discord and like, hey, why didn't you do this? Or why don't you support this feature? And now you're like, fuck, I have to change everything in the API to solve this. So yeah, 1.0, I have no idea when we'll do that. Yeah. So like, it seemed like there's a bunch of things that we'll be able to address for 0.6 that have been like bugs and issues for a long time, which is really awesome. So yeah, I am basically melting in my living room. It's really hot here. I've had the door and windows closed for all the noise, but that means it's really hot. So I think I will end the stream here. We've basically been going for 2 hours. I had fun. I think we did some productive work, and thank you for joining, and thank you for all the questions. And yeah, I'll see you on the GitHub or on the Discord or Twitter or wherever. Yeah, thanks for joining. See ya.